Masechet Menaḥot, Daf Chaf Dalid. We're going to be talking about the laws of Siruf Keli, which means that when you put something in a vessel, then the vessel joins everything that's inside the airspace of the vessel together. That's important for a Korban Mincha, because when you bring the flour and everything else that comes with it, you have to put it into a vessel, because that's how it turns into one item, that it's all in the same vessel. Now, so Siruf Kli, that everything in a vessel joins together, that's important for, number one, making the Korban into one entity. However, it also has a downside, which is tum'ah. If someone comes and touches something that's in a vessel, will it make the other items in the vessel tameh as well, even if they're not touching each other, or only if they are touching each other? So we're going to see all kinds of scenarios like that right now. Ki salik Rav Kahana. When Rav Kahana moved from Bavel to Eretz Yisrael, he made aliyah. Ashkechinu lebene Rabbi Chia diatve ve'ka'amri. He found there the sons of Rabbi Chia, she had two sons, and they were sitting and they were saying the following halacha. Isaron shechileko v'inicho bebisa v'naga tibul yom be'achat mehem mahu. If you have an isaron, that's an asirit ha'efa, a tenth of an efa of flour, that's the measurement for a korban mincha. So we'll just call that from now on the measurement. And really you're supposed to just keep it all together. It's supposed to be contiguous, all one whole. But what if you split it into two parts? So you have half a measurement here and half a measurement there, and you put them both inside the same bowl, but one's on one side and one's on the other side, and the two sides, the two measurements, half measurements, are not touching each other. And then a tivul yom, that's someone who was tameh, he went to the mikveh during the day. He will be fully tahor only at nightfall, but now it's still before nightfall. And so for certain things, he's tahor enough, like to eat maaser sheni, but for other things, he's not yet tahor enough, and for example, he cannot eat terumah still, and such a person, if he touches kodashim, will make the kodesh tameh. So a tivul yom, surely, if he touches sacrificial meat, or if he touches a meal offering, will make the meal offering tameh. But in this case, he only touched one of the half measures. We'll call them A and B. And they're not touching each other, but they are in the same bowl. So do we say that when he touches lump A of flour, will that make the other pile of flour, lump B, also tameh, even though they're not touching, because it's in the same bowl? So what do we say? Ki tenan keli misaref ma shebetocho lakodesh, hanemi lehechad denag'i behadadeh, aval hechad la nag'i behadadeh la, or dilma lo shena. And so this is all part of the question that he's asking. We have a Mishnah in Masechet Hagigah that talks about this, a case that's very similar to this. It says in Masechet Chagigah that a vessel, a bowl, will mitzaref, join together that which is in it if it's kodesh. Not if it's terumah, but yes, if it's kodesh. Meaning, let's say there's two pieces of meat, kodesh meat, that are in the bowl, and a tivul yom touches one of them. Then, since they're in the same bowl, the other one will also become tameh. However, it's not clear exactly what the case is in that Mishnah. Is that only if the two pieces of meat are touching each other, and that's when, by touching one, it transfers tum'ah, because they're touching each other and they're in the same bowl. So then it transfers to the other one. But maybe if they're not touching each other, then just because it's in the same bowl, it will not transfer tum'ah. And therefore, similarly in our case, where we have two piles of flour, A and B, in the same bowl, but not touching each other, perhaps touching one will not transfer tum'ah to the other. Or maybe it doesn't matter if they're touching each other or not, just the fact that they're in the airspace of the same bowl, that connects them together, both for good and bad. It connects them together so that it's one offering, but it also means that they're considered as if together for the transfer of tum'ah. That's the question. And Rav Kahana answered, Amar lehu ihu. Right, Rav Kahana went to Eretz Yisrael. He found that they were saying this, and the sons of Rabbi Chia were asking that question. And Rav Kana had an answer for them. And so he said, Mi tenan kli mechaber, kli mesaref tenan, kol dehu. The Mishnah does not say that the vessel combines them together, mechaber, which would mean physically attached. Rather, it says it joins them together. Join just means legally they're considered joined. And therefore, even if they are not touching each other physically, still they are considered joined together by being within the same bowl. And so we have an answer to this question. Yes, in fact, if you touch the lump A of flour, it will make the lump B also tameh, even though they're not touching, because it's in the same vessel. Okay, good. Now the sons of Rabbi Chia ask a second question. Hoshit echad lebenehen mahu. What if someone, same scenario, but we're going to add another pile. So we have pile A on one side, pile B on the other side. Each of them are a half measurement of the same korban. However, someone comes and puts a half measurement in the middle of them. We'll call that C. Puts it right in between, not touching either one. But this one is from a different korban. So what about in that case? If you touch A, will it make C also tameh because it's in the same vessel? Or maybe not, because even though it's in the same vessel, it's not connected legally because it's from a different korban. And maybe the tumah will only transfer to two halves of the same korban mincha. And Rav Kana has an answer to this too. Amar lehu, sarich lakli, keli mesarfo. And sarich lakli, and keli mesarfo. And he says, in fact, C will not be tameh in this case, because only if you need the vessel in order to make it sanctified, to join it together, then the vessel also will act to transfer tumah. So in the first case above, when you have just A and B, and they are two parts of the same korban mincha, there you need the vessel to join them together, because otherwise it won't be sanctified. Since they're joined together to sanctify, they also join together to transfer tumah. However, en sarich la keli and keli mesarfo. If you don't need the vessel to make it consecrated, and here when you plop C down in the middle of them, C is from a different korban, so the vessel is not helping you at all to join C together with the others to make it consecrated. And therefore, if it not needed to make it consecrated with the others, it also will not join it together to transfer tum'ah. Next question they ask, third one. Hoshit tevul yom et espao benehen. Mahu. Same setup as the first one, where you have half a measurement on the left side, that's A, and half a measurement on the right side of the bowl, that's B, and they're not touching each other. And this time, the tevul yom does not touch A, but rather just puts his hand in the middle, between A and B. What about that case? What you might say that even something in the airspace of the bowl will make everything in the bowl tameh, because after all, how is A and B connected to each other if they're not touching? Oh, it must be the airspace of the bowl joins everything inside together. And so that's why if he touches A, that tumah transfers in through the airspace of the bowl to B, that's also in the bowl. If so, what if he just puts his hand in the airspace? Well, that itself transfer both to A and B. And he has an answer. Amar lehu, en lecha davar shemetamem aviro ela kedicheres bilvad. No, there is no cases where tumah will spread in the air unless it's an earthenware vessel. Earthenware vessel, tumah goes inside, even if it's not touching anything, even not even touching the vessel or anything inside, it spreads throughout. So yeah, that would be true in a clay vessel, but that's not our case. And so no, in our case, just putting your hand in the airspace will not transfer tumah to the flour. Hadar ihu be'aminaihu. After the sons of Rabbi Chia asked Rav Kahana these three questions, Rav Kahana said, I have a question for you now. We turn the tables. Mahu likmot mizeh al zeh. Can you take a kometz from pile A for pile B also? There, and again, you have a half measurement from one korban. On left side that's A, and on the right side is B. And now you want to take the kometz. Does it all have to be together in one single continuous pile when you take a kometz, or can you take a kometz from A, and B is joined since it's in the same bowl, so it's all considered joined together. Now, what's the essence of his question? Seruf deoraita or derabanan? When we say that a bowl joins things together, because we did say that in the Mishnah in Masechet Chagiga, is that a deoraita law or a derabanan law? You see, if it's a derabanan law, that means it's only lichumra, not likula. It's only to transfer tuma. That's the point, that it joins together and transfers tuma one to the other. But on a deoraita level, they're really not connected, and therefore doing komets on one is not going to be good. It's not going to fulfill the obligation of the komets because it's not all together. Or do we say that the vessel joins everything together even on a deoraita level, which would mean it's for lechumra and also likula. It will validate this komets, and it's perfectly valid. That's his question. Amiru lo, zo lo shamanu. So, unlike Rav Kahana, he answered all of their questions and gave them definitive answers. But for this one, they said, we did not hear a tradition about your question. We don't know. However, kayose bo shamanu. We did hear about a similar case, and maybe we can derive an answer from this. And this is actually our Mishnah here in Masechet Menaḥot that we learned above. Titnan, shene Menaḥot, shelo nikmesu v'nitarebu zo bezo. Im yachol likmos mizo b'fnei asma mizo b'fnei asma. Kesherot v'im lav pesulot. You have two korban minchas. It's two separate ones, and you didn't take a kometz from either one. But then the flour of each of them got mixed together in a big bowl. Now, if it's all totally mixed together, and you can't identify any spot from A or from B, then it's no good. But if you can take a kometz from, we'll call it A and B, A by itself, and from B by itself, then it's valid. If not, it's invalid. In other words, it mixed together, but you can see on the left side, you can identify a certain spot that has only flour from korban mincha A. And somewhere on the right side, you can identify some spot that has flour only from korban mincha B. The rest is all mixed up. But as long as you can identify some space that you could put your hand in and do a kometz, then that's all right. Now, Ki yachol likmotz miha kesherot. What can we derive from this? The sons of Rabbi Chia say that if you can take a kometz from some section, then it's kosher. Amai, hach dima'arav halo naga. But how could that be kosher? After all, it's not contiguous. The flour from korban mincha A fell into this bowl, and a lot of it got mixed up with all the other flour, and it's all over the place. There's only one spot of, half of it or a quarter of the full original amount is in one spot, so you could take the kometz, but the rest is mixed up all over and is not contiguous, and yet the Mishnah says it's okay. So from here, we can answer the question positively that, so too, if you had half a measurement on one side and half a measurement on the other side of just one korban mincha, then yes, you can take a kometz from here, and that will fulfill the obligation because all of the flour is in one bowl, so it's considered as if joined together, and that kometz will be valid also. Isn't that a good proof? Rava says it's not a good proof because it could be that our Mishnah is talking about clumps that are divided like teeth of a comb. In other words, you can imagine on the left side is korban mincha A, and there's a nice piece over there of korban mincha A, enough that you could take a kometz, and then the rest of it is jagged, kind of like teeth of a comb. And then you can imagine korban mincha B being over here on the other side, and it has one area that has enough that you can, it's pure B, that you can take a kometz, and the rest of it is jagged. Imagine like another comb interlocking with the teeth of this comb. Now, even though in the middle they're in a way mixed up because they're interlocking, but actually all of A is contiguous, and all the flour from korban mincha B is also contiguous. It's all connected to each other, and that's the case where it's permissible. Even though the section in the middle is A, B, one after the other, so it's mixed up in that sense. So therefore you couldn't take a kometz from there. Nevertheless, actually, it's not mixed up in such a way that some of A is in area B totally, but rather all of A is, all the flour from A is contiguous, a little jagged over here, and all of B is continuous, even though it's jutting in to the other side. And therefore, there is no proof from this source. Okay, so now we're left with no proof. The Gemara asks later on, "Ma have Allah?" Okay, so what's the resolution? If you have, again, this case of A on one side, B on the other side, two half measurements that are not touching each other, can you take a kometz from A and fulfill the obligation for all of it? Amar Rava Tashema Detanya Veherim Mimenu Mina Mechubar Shelo Yavi Isaron Bishne Chelim Vikmotz. We have a baraita that teaches that he shall take up from it a handful. It, mimenu, means from it is singular, and that means from something that is connected. And that teaches that you cannot take, if there's a isaron of flour, the measurement of flour, in two different vessels, if you have half in one vessel and half in a different vessel, and you do the kometz from one vessel, it will not work. It has to be together. Okay, so that is an obvious halacha. But here's the chidush: habikli echad dumyad shne chelim kamitz. We can infer from this that if it were in one vessel, even in a way similar to two vessels. In what way? What does that mean, similar to two vessels? That meaning that it's in one vessel, but it's on two sides of the vessel. Part A is on the right side, and part B is on the left side, and so they're not actually touching each other, but as long as it's in one vessel, you can take from one to the other, because otherwise the baraita should have given the bigger chidush. It says it's only not good if it's in two separate vessels, but if it's in one vessel, even if it's separated, then it's okay. So isn't that a good proof, Rava says? אמר לאביי, דילמה שני כלים הכידמה, כגון כפיזה בקבה, דף אגב דאריבי מאילי, כיוון דמפסק מחיצתה, דזקיפה מיתתה. הכלי אחד ומיד שני כלים הכידמה, כגון ערבתה של תרנגולין, ואף אגב דמפסקן מחיצתה, הנגיעה, אבל אחד אלא הנגיעה כלל תיבא אלך. Abaye says, no, this baraita is also not a proof, because it's not clear what cases is talking about when it says two vessels and then the inference is one vessel that's like two vessels. You assume that's talking about two separate vessels completely, but maybe not. Maybe it's talking about a case of a small measurement inside a big measurement. Imagine you take a small cup and put it inside a big cup, such that there is a partition, but inside the big cup that's higher up, there's a lower partition. Or you could think of those plates that we use for kids to serve them three different things, and you have a division inside the plate, but those dividers are lower than the rim of the plate outside. So if you'd put all of the flour in there, so on the lower part of the vessel, they are divided. But on the higher part, they all get mixed together. Maybe that's what it's talking about when it says shenei chelim, because at the bottom, they're in separate vessels. And therefore, when you take a kometz, let's say from one side, but there's actually a divider underneath that's separating it from the rest of it, and in that case, it's no good, because the partition divides them from below, and that would not be good. And if that's the case of shenei chelim, meaning they're really in one big vessel, but with a lower partition that's inside that one big vessel, and that's where it's not good, then the inference would be, if it's one vessel that's similar to two vessels, that would be okay. That would be a case the opposite. The example is a trough of hens, where you fill it, let's say, with water, fodder, and there's divisions on the higher part. The upper half has divisions, so each of the hens won't fight, and they'll take separate ones. But underneath, it's connected, so that if one drinks a lot, then it'll fill up from the other ones. And so here, the opposite, they're connected on the bottom. And so that would be okay. That's the inference. Since they're connected on the bottom, what if they're connected on the bottom or not? That's the main thing. Doesn't really matter if there's a partition higher up. And so that would be okay. But in our case that we've been talking about from above, where there's no partition at all inside the vessel, it's just that half is on this side and half is on that side, and they're not touching each other, but there's nothing blocking it either, not above and not below. There we would have a question. Is it similar to the first case where there's a partition on the bottom even though it's open on top, and here, well, there's no partition on the bottom, but they're not touching, so maybe it's still not good, and it has to be touching like the case on the like this case where they're touching on the bottom, or maybe not. Maybe in this case, because there's no partition at all, it's okay. It's only bad if there's some partition. So this baraita is talking about different cases where there's a partition on the upper half, but the bottom half is actually touching. That's okay. If there's a partition on the bottom half, that's no good because it's actually physically separating. But in our case, there's no physical separation. So in fact, this baraita is not relevant to our case. We cannot figure our case out, and we don't have an answer to it. Now, another question that Rabbi Yirmiyah asks about the subject. Seruf kli v'chibur mayim mahu. Okay, a more complicated setup, not too complicated. You have a bowl where you have a half a measurement of a korban mincha on one side. We'll call that A. And then another half a measurement on the other side. We'll call that B, like we had before. But now we have a third half measure of flour outside of the bowl. So it has no relevance if it's just outside the bowl. But here's the thing. It's connected to B with a stream of water. And so, since water is physically connecting B and C, so they are somewhat connected. What would be the law in such a case? Ki tenan, keli mesaref ma shebetocho lakodesh hanemile degavai, aval debarai la, or dilma kevan mechabad. So, in this case, if you touched, let's say, A, so we established that A will make B tameh. Okay, fine. But how about B? Well, that makes C tameh. When we say that a vessel joins together that which is in it. Regarding kodesh, food, maybe that applies only to the things that are inside the bowl. So A can make B tameh, or if you touch B, it'll make A tameh. But to transfer tumah outside the bowl, no way. Or do we say, well, since it's physically connected, so it's all together, it's all one. And by touching A, since that makes B tameh, and B is physically connected to C, so maybe they all get tameh. And if you say that once something is connected, yes, it's all considered one and becomes tameh. Same setup, but this time instead of the tivul yom touching A, he touches C. In other words, he touches the pile of half measurement of flour that's outside the bowl. He touches that, and since that's connected physically by a stream of water to B, so now B will become tameh, because if we establish that that it is a connection like that is considered a connection. Now that B is tameh, will that also make A tameh? Right? Do we say ki tenan keli mesaref ha nemile denagat migavai? When we say that a vessel joins together that which is inside, is that only if you touch something in the vessel? Then it will make A touching A will make B tameh, and B will make A tameh. But maybe touching something outside of it will not make the other things that are joined in the vessel tameh. So touching C will make B tameh, but it won't transfer to A. Or maybe it doesn't matter. As long as B becomes tameh, it doesn't matter if the tivul yom touches it directly or indirectly touches C, and then C makes B tameh. The point is, once B becomes tameh, no matter how it becomes tameh, because in the same vessel, it will transfer to A. We leave this question unanswered. Rava has a question. Isaron shechi leko, v'nitma echad mehem, v'nicho bebisa, v'chazar tivul yom v'naga beoto tameh mahu. If you have an isaron, a full measure of flour, and you split it, so they're both in the same vessel. You have A on the right side and B on the left side, and one of them became tameh first before you put it in the vessel. So you have a full amount of measurement. You split it into two outside the vessel. The Tavul Yom touches one when it's outside the vessel. Let's say it touches A. And then you put A in the vessel and you put B in the vessel. And now they're in the same vessel together. And then a Tavul Yom goes ahead and touches A. The one that was already Tameh touches it again. Now, will that transfer Tumah to B? Mi amrinan Sabah lo Tumah o lo. Do we say that A was already full of Tumah, and therefore that's not going to become Tameh again, and therefore it will not transfer Tumah? Or do we say even something that's Tameh, when the Tavul Yom touches it again, it reifies, it comes back again, that Tumah, and then it will transfer to B. The point is that if, let's say there's two people, right? I have a full measurement, and I take it, I split it in half, and I give one to one person and one to the other person, and A, I give it to someone, and that person is a Tavul Yom. Okay, so he's a Tavul Yom. Now they both place their halves in the same vessel. At that point, B is not going to become Tameh, because just placing one that's Tameh and one that's Tahor in the same vessel is not going to make B Tameh, just because someone placed it there. It's only when someone touches it, when it's in the vessel, then it will make the other one Tameh. So that's fine, but that's good. If they're both tahor to begin with and someone touches A, yes, it will transfer to B. But our question is, what if A was already tameh even before it went into the vessel? By touching it again, will it kind of reactivate and cause B to become tameh? Or no, A is already tameh, so there's no change in status, and therefore, if there's no change in status, then it will not affect B at all. Amar le Abaye, Omi amrinan sabah le tum'ah, v'hatenan sadin tameh. Abaye says, do we have a principle that something can be saturated from tum'ah? We see that something, there's no such thing as being saturated from tum'ah, and that it doesn't become tameh again. Where do we see that we do not have such a principle? From this Mishnah Masechet Kelim that says, sadin tameh, a sheet. A sheet is made for sitting down or lying down on, and it became tameh midras. Vasa'o vilon tahor min hamidras aval tameh maga midras. So midras, tumat midras, is a high level tumah. If someone, let's say a zav makes things tameh not just by touching things, but also by sitting on it, putting his weight on something, even if he's not touching it. It goes all the way down, mattress upon mattress, anything that is made to sit on cushions, sheets. If they're made to sit on chairs, then he will make it an av hatumah, a high level of tumah. So this thing was a sheet, which is something that's made to lie down, to put weight on, to lie down on. And he laid down on something that was on top of that sheet, and he made it tumat midras. But then he changed his mind. He says, this sheet, I'm going to make it into a window curtain. Now, window curtains are not made for sitting on. And so now that it's a window curtain, tahor min hamidras, aval tameh maga midras. The halacha of the Mishnah is, we remove the high level of tum'ah, of being tumat midras. However, it still remains a lower level tum'ah of something that touches a midras, which would be a lower level, only a rishon, which would only make food and drink tameh. Now, why is that? Well, because it's touching itself. Even though it's no longer a sheet, so it's not going to have the high level, it's going to remove, that is removed, but since each thread, in a way, is touching the thread next to it, so it does cause the thing next to it to become tameh at the lower level of tumah. Amar Rabbi Yosef, be'eze midras naga ze, ela she'im naga bo hazav, tameh maga hazav. Rabbi Yosef disagrees with Tanakama, and he says, well, what tumat midras did it touch? And when he sits on it, the whole sheet is tumat midras. When you hang it up and make it into a window curtain, now that's it. It's not a sheet anymore. So therefore, it would be not tameh at all. It will only become tameh. It will only remain having some level of tumah if the zav also touched it. So he sat on it. That's tumat midras, and he touched it. So when he touches it, now it gets a second layer of tum'ah, which is, although it's a lower layer, but that remains on it even when the first layer is removed. What's the point? We see from this Mishnah that we do not have a principle of sava le tum'ah, because if you had that principle, then once he sits on it, he's not touching it when he's sitting on it. He's sitting on the mattress that's on top of the sheet. Once he puts his weight on it, then it's already full. It's a highest level of tum'ah. So it's already topped out. If you say sabah le tum'ah, then if he touches it after, it will have no effect. And then when he makes it a sheet, it will be 0. However, Rabbi Yosef does not say that. Instead, Rabbi Yosef says that if he sits on it and then touches it, the touching tum'ah adds to it. In other words, even though it's full, you can add more. We don't say that sava le tum'ah. And therefore you prove from here that there's no such thing as sava le tum'ah. Abaye completes his proof by explaining, Ki nagabo hazav miha tameh. When the zav touches it, it was already tameh, the highest level of midras. And yet, it adds another level. Va'afilu basof, and even if he touches it second, in other words, even if he sits on it first and then touches it second, ketameh midras, va'achar kach maga hazav. That will be like a case of tumat midras, which is already av hatuma, and then he touches it afterwards. Still, according to the Rabbi Yosef, once you turn it into a curtain, although the tumat midras goes away, but the second thing that he put there is the maga still remains. Amai, why should it remain? Le'ema savat le'tumah. Why don't you say, it became full, completely satiated already from the first time that he sat on it and it became midras, and you can't add anything to that, and therefore when he makes it a sheet, it should be totally tahor, but we do not say that. And therefore you see that we do not say that something becomes full of tumah and you can't add any more. And if so, in our case where the one pile was already tameh, and then someone put it in to the bowl with the other pile, at that point it's not transferring yet, but when the Tevul Yom comes and touches again, so we don't say, it was already full and there's no change, so it doesn't add anything. No, we don't say that. When he touches it again, it reactivates that tumah and will then transfer tumah to B. So that would be the conclusion. That is Abaye's proof from this baraita. However, this Mishnah in Kelim. However, Rava says, not so fast. Marle, umimai dehai sheim naga bo hazav lebatar midras. How do you know when that when Rabbi Yosef says, if the tameh had touched it? How do you know that means it was second, that first he sat on it and then touched it? Maybe it's the other way around. Dilma mekame midras, tavya tuma chamura al tuma kala. Maybe the case was like this. You have a bed sheet. It's under a mattress, and the zav first came and touched it and made it a low-level tumah. Then, afterwards, he put his weight on top of it and made it a higher-level tumah. In that case, both layers take effect because you had the lower one first, and then the higher one certainly can apply on top of that. Afterwards, when you take the sheet and make it into a window shade, now the higher level one, which was second, is removed, but the first one, the maga, certainly will still stay. That's why it stays. That's the case that Rabbi Yosef had in mind. Aval hacha de'idi v'idi tum'a kala la. But back to that case. But in that case, if it was the other way around, if it was midras first, the higher level, and then the lower level would not apply. So in other words, maybe we say saveya. Once it's full, it does not, tumah does not apply anymore. And therefore, in our case, where you have a Tevul Yom touched pile A when it was outside. Now he puts it in the bowl together with B. And then he touches it again. Touching it again, they're both equal levels of a low level of impurity, because just a Tevul Yom, so it's a low level. But they're both the same level, and it will not apply again. If it will not reactivate A, then it will not transfer tum'ah to B. And so therefore, there is no proof from here, Rava says. However, maybe we can try again. from the Sefa, where we learn, Modeh Rabbi Yosef bishne sadinim. This is a follow-up from Rabbi Yosef's case from above. If you have two sheets, hamekupalin munachim ze al gav ze, they're folded, and one is placed upon the other. Remember, when a zav sits on something, tumah goes all the way down. Avat tumah goes all the way down, even 10 sheets and mattresses. And one's on top of the other. V'yashav zav alehen, and he sits on them. Sha'alyon tameh midras, v'tachton tameh midras, u'maga midras. The one above, the sheet above, is tameh tumat midras, because the zav is sitting on it. And the one below is tameh tumat midras, and also touching. Why? Well, it's tumat midras because the weight of the zav is on it, and it touches the top one, the sheet that's right above it, which is tameh midras, is touching the one below. So it has both layers of tum'ah. Now, why would that be? Ve'amai lema sabah le tum'ah. Why don't you say it already became tumat midras when he sat on it, and so now it can't get another layer, and that's it. It's just it's only midras. How could it get both layers? Isn't this a proof that we don't say saveya, that it's full, that's it? No, you can add another level of tumah, and therefore in our case also, when the tevul yom touches it again, when it's inside, it will make bi tameh. We say no, that's also not a good proof, because hatam bebatachat, hacha bezeh charzeh. In that case, that the bottom sheet got both layers of tumah at the same instant, and so there both can. In other words, if it's the lower level and then the higher level after, yes, it can apply, and it also can apply when it's at the same instant. At the second the zav sits on the pile, so then the lower one is going to become tumat midras, and it's touching the one right above it immediately at the same instant. It gets both of them. So there, two levels can apply. However, in our case of the bowl, first the tevul yom touched it when it was outside the bowl. Okay, now that's it. It's already tameh. And now you put it in the bowl, and later on he touches it again. Well, no, only if it's at the same instant it can get two layers. But if it's only at one, if it's at two separate times and it was already tameh, then the new tumah will not apply. It's already full of that same level of tumah, and therefore there is no proof at all, not even from the sefa, the continuation of the Rabbi Yosef's opinion. Amar Rava, isaron shechileko ve'avad echad mehen v'ifrish acher tachtav. You have a case of, you have an isaron. That's the proper measurement of a korban mincha offering. And then a person's divided it into two parts. So you have half isaron, half isaron. Let's call the first half A and the second half B. And then B was lost. Now what are you going to do? Well, A is still okay, so still perfectly fine, but you only have half a measurement. So he separated another half of an isaron to replace B. Let's call that C. Okay, now if you stop there, you have A and C. Good, everything is a regular korban mincha. But turns out, now they found B. It was just in a closet somewhere. Now they have all three together. And all three of them are in a receptacle, in a bowl, all together. Now, you only need two out of the three. So surely A is part of the korban, because that was always, from the beginning, that was valid. And now the question is, since B was lost and we designated C, so is A and C really the korban? Or because you originally designated B and C was only a replacement, now we found B, so maybe A and B is the korban. So we're not really sure which one is going to be the proper counterpart of A. Is it going to be B or C? So let's go through the different scenarios of what happens when someone, a tevul yom, touches one of them. Nitma avud, the one that had been lost. B, if a tevul yom touches that one, then avud v'rishon mistarfin. Then B and A join together, and those two become tameh. But C remains tahor because you touched B. So B and C surely don't join together with each other, because either B or C. But A surely does join with whichever one is the right one. So you touch B, we have to assume that B could be the proper one, and it joins A. A and B are tameh, and C is okay. Mufrash and mistaref, the one that had been separated, C, is not going to join together. That remains tahor. Nitma mufrash. Let's say Tevul Yom touched C. Well then, mufrash v'rishon mistarfin, avud and mistaref. Then C and A will join together because it could be that C, the replacement actually now, since after B was lost, C became the real one, and the fact that B was found later doesn't really matter. C remains the one that joins together with A, so we have to treat C as tameh, as well as A, but B does not join, so it's still tahor. Nitma rishon shenehem mistarfin. If a Tevul Yom touched A, then both B and C are tameh. Only because we don't know which one is really the one that joins with A, is it B or C, so we have to be machmir and treat all of them as tameh. Abaye amad afilu nitma echad mehen nameh shenehem mistarfin. My ta'ama kulehu b'nei bikta dehadadeh ninhu. Abaye disagrees with Ravan. He says, even if any one of them became tameh, Tevul Yom touched any one of them, doesn't matter, A, B, or C, the other two also become tameh, all of them. Why? Because they're all residents of one cabin. They're all put together, and since they're all in one bowl, now that's it. They're all part of the korban, and we don't know which the two out of the three. They're all in the same boat, and they all become tameh. V'chen inyan kemisa. All that we just said regarding making something tameh will also apply regarding doing a kemitzah on any one of them. Then does that fulfill kemitzah so that you can eat the remainder of that one and one more? Which one? Let's see. Kamas min havud. This is now back to Rava, who says we're going to choose B or C, but only one of them, and we have to figure out which one it is. So, kamas min ha'avud. It took a kometz from B, the one that had been lost. Shi'arav, so the remainder of B certainly now is permitted for the Kohanim to eat, because that's for sure. You took a kometz from that, so that's good. Ve'rishon ne'echalin. And A also will be you can eat the whole thing, because if you took from B, then A for sure is part of the korban. You took from B, so A and B joined together. That's a proper korban. And you can eat the leftovers from B and all of A. Mufrash and onechal. But C is out of the picture because you brought that in after, and we don't know if that's really part of the korban, and you didn't take an kometz from it, so you can't eat C because you didn't take a kometz on its behalf. We don't think so. Kamatz min hamufrash shi'arav rishon nechalin abud ne'eno ne'echal. If you took a kometz again from C, then the remainder of C you can eat because you took the kometz from that, so that's for sure okay. And and A is also okay because A was there from the beginning, so surely A is part of the korban. So you have A and C, whereas B, you didn't take a kometz from that, and B and C aren't going to join together because it's one or the other, and so B cannot be eaten. Kamatz min harishon shenehem enan ne'echalin. If you take a kometz from A, then you cannot eat from B or C because we don't know which one is the real counterpart. And so, you can't have from B or C. That's the opinion of Rava. Abaye amar afilu kamas me'achad mehen shenehem enan ne'echalin. My ta'ama kuluhu nameh b'nei bikta dehadadeh ninhu. Abaye similarly disagrees as he did above, and he said, doesn't matter if you took a kemitzah from any of them, A, B, or C, the other two cannot be eaten. Why? Because they're all in the same boat. They're all residents of one cabin. So we treat all of them together, and therefore you took a kometz of one, but not the other two. So however you're going to treat the other, the one of them that wasn't taken from, so too you have to treat the other that the kometz was not taken from. Okay, now how about the one that you did take a kometz from? Matkif la papa ve'shirayim dideh mi hanechalin. Okay, so you're telling me, Abaye, that let's say you take from B, you can't eat from A or C, according to Abaye. But Papa asks about them. How about B itself? You took the kometz from B, then the remainder of B, that you can eat? Ha'ika danka de komes de la kariv. But we have a problem because there's going to be a sixth of a handful that was not sacrificed. In other words, when he takes a kometz from B, so that kometz is on behalf of three different piles. So that's a third for B, a third for A, and a third for C. The problem is that only two of those thirds is valid. 1/3 is for a pile that actually is not part of the korban. And because of that, you're missing 1/3 that should be added to the kometz. And that has to come from somewhere. So it really should come from half of the third, a sixth from one of the piles and a sixth from one of the other piles that has to be joined in. And so you're missing that amount. You can phrase the same thing similarly in the following question. Matkif la Rav Yitzchak bered Rav Meshashia bekomes kufe hechi karib haika tilta chulin. So a similar challenge against Abaye that Rav Papa says, just looking at it from the perspective of the kometz itself and the fact that you're burning it. He says the kometz itself, how can you burn it on the mizbeach? After all, a third of it is chulin, because again, you took a kometz from B. Okay, fine. So that a third of that is for B. That's valid. A third of it for A, which is surely part of it. But you have another third of it that, since you took it for everything, a third of it is for C. But C is not part of it. And so now that is actually chulin. And now you're taking chulin and burning it on the mizbeach. So it's the same problem in opposite ways. You have a third in there that is chulin. And on the other hand, you need another third, from a sixth from here and a sixth from there, in order to make up the difference. Rav Asher Amar kometz beda'ata de kohen talia mileta vechen ki kamitz aisaron ka kamitz. Rav Asher says no, there's no problem with that. These two questions, because the kometz relies on the intention of the kohen, and the kohen, when he takes the kometz, he has in mind, he says, this will be for the isaron. That is part of the korban, whichever one it is. Hashem, you know which one it is. And so I'm taking the kometz for the proper other pile, and all of the kometz. He's not thinking a third is for this, a third is for A, a third is for B, a third is for C. Rather, I'm taking a kometz for the isaron, whatever two halves are properly part of it, and therefore all of the kometz is kodesh, and whichever other pile it is that is part of the proper part of the korban, that one is taken care of. Now we don't know which one, so that's why you can't eat either of the other two. But the kometz itself is a valid kometz, and therefore you can at least eat from the pile from which you took the kometz. Baruch Adonai Leolam. Amen v'amen.